I try to make a distinction between the experience of the wonderfulness, and I also say that when we discover is no repeat, we can say, wow, we can make this experience. But if in truth these things are not, we cannot make this experience. So I think that also the realistic phenomenology is exactly this approach. So it's a discovery of beauty in reality. We have not the power. Well, something can make sense for me, but I'm far from hermeneutics in this sense. I'm much more near to the realistic approach. And so I think that, of course, without our discovery, nothing makes sense, but there is a sense inside as for the ontology nature of things. And I think that also in the education, in the panorama of education, this really change the perspective, you know? If you bring a student to make this discovery, because you are really sure that there is something that has to be discovered. So I think that this is the challenge for today.
Thank you. And we've got a microphone, so if you raise your hand, and also please say to whom you are posing the question. Okay, to whom one of the four panelists. So, any of you? Question or two? So in the meantime, I'll continue with my question. So, Dr. Galliford, I was thinking during your presentation, so you applied Aristotelian approach to gratitude, but gratitude is not on Aristotle's list of virtues. Wouldn't you say it's more appropriate to apply some kind of neo-Thomistic approach to gratitude, since it seems to be sort of somehow closer to love as a virtue? What would you say?
Well, I would say that I agree with you. When I started the Jubilee Centre Character and Virtues in 2012, I was assigned to the Attitude for Gratitude project. I was very happy with that because, as I mentioned, my PhD focused on critical examination of positive psychology in general, but also its understanding of forgiveness, gratitude, courage, and hope. So I was very pleased that I was assigned to that project. But because the Jubilee Centre espouses an Aristotelian or a neo-Aristotelian approach, we were committed to doing an Aristotelian reconstruction, which is the word that you just used as well, isn't it? A reconstruction in relation to virtue gratitude. So I would agree that actually, and I even said in the talk, that actually the question of whether an Aristotelian approach fits all the way down, that whole question of legality as well, and whether it really is perhaps the best approach to virtue of gratitude is maybe questionable. So you could see, I hope, how we applied that approach. We obviously wanted to take a reason to counter gratitude. We wanted to look at the multi-component nature of gratitude. We wanted to raise the question of can we canvass the views of the many as well as the wise. So I think we did go some way with that endeavour. However, I was pretty committed because of the allegiance of the Jubilee Centre to doing that Aristotelian approach, and I would want to question whether actually there could be other master virtues like love that might be better to replicate gratitude than looking at phronesis as the master virtues. So I agree. Thank you.
Great. Gentlemen over there,
Děkuji, Miroslav. Poslanská otázka,
English if possible.
Okay, my question is also about gratitude and about the difference between Australian and UK kids or adolescents. What do you see there as a reason of this difference? And is it maybe based somehow on education? Could it be learned that how you response to.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So first of all, one thing that I must say in caveat is that this is obviously based on one study. So we did the prototype study where we found that the UK adults, students, named more negative features of gratitude. Then when we did the vignette study, as you remarked, we noticed that it seemed as though Australian adolescents were less impacted by these ulterior motives than were the UK adolescents. And even in the gratitude stories as well, there was this difference between the kids not thinking that somebody having an ulterior motive wanted to copy the answers to the Sloan test wasn't, had as much effect on gratitude. So, okay, it's one study with 3 different parts. So the caveat I want to make is that, to quote Aristotle, one swallow does not a summer make, right? So it's only one study. If you wanted to be confident about it, then obviously you would actually have to replicate the studies several times. But it was interesting that we found that. So that's the first thing to say. This is our finding, but whether you would find that repeatedly is another question. So you asked me, so what could explain this, right? And the fact that we saw these differences, albeit in cross-sectional studies, so we saw it in young people, we saw it in adolescents, and then in the prototype analysis there were fewer negative features. That does suggest that there may be some the cultural kind of aperture for gratitude may be more open in Australia than it is in the UK. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stereotypes about British people that we repressed, maybe negative. So that could be part of it. It could just simply be that there's more of a kind of a positive sort of in Australia that's actually closer to the USA study that kicked it all off, approach that. However, there are some other interpretations. One of them could be that culturally, people may see this more as a quid pro quo, an exchange. You've done me a benefit, I'm doing you a benefit. It may just be that it isn't seen as necessarily, an ulterior motive. On the other hand, you said, could it be something to do with education, right? When you say could it be to do with education, do you mean that the way children are taught, from their earliest days? Yeah, well, that might be the case. I'd have to know more about the Australian education system to say that with confidence. Whatever you say, though, I think it's important that this education aspect is emphasised, so that when children are familiarised with the concept of gratitude as part of maybe a virtue education or character education approach, that they do get taught some virtue literacy, as well, so they can discuss whether they think there's some motive or whatever. One thing that may be salient, and very important in answering your question, it's a good question, is this. The schools that we recruited in the UK for the gratitude stories, and we also used the gratitude vignettes in secondary schools, right? They weren't schools, many of them, who had any interest in character education. However, when we recruited the schools in Australia, through Professor Lee Waters, who's at the University of Melbourne, most of the schools that she recruited with us, they were involved in positive education. So they were private schools where actually different virtues were mentioned each week, and certainly gratitude would be one of them. So it's possible that they were actually more pro-gratitude, less discriminating, as I might describe, because they had had curricula that actually emphasised, the gratitude is a good thing. So I think it could be cultural differences, it could be differences in terms of the specific schools that were involved. Without replicating it further, obviously it's still an empirical question. But it wasn't what we expected to find, actually. And it was weird, it was a bit unexpected that we had that less negative view of the ulterior motive in both the children stories for 8 to 11-year-olds and in the yeah, that makes you think it may be easy, just a clue. But it's a good question. So.
Som sa chcel spýtať hovoriť po slovensky, po polskej. Naznačila o svojej prezentácii určitú diferenciu medzi neoholbergianským a neoaristotelovským prístupom. Toto je jeden z bodov, o ktorom chceme diskutovať na našom sympóziu. Chcem sa spýtať, či tieto dva prístupy sú alebo vnímate skôr ako komplementárne, alebo skôr protikladné, a ak protikladné, tak v čom? A potom druhá otázka, prepáčte, aby si možno mohla Eliza rozmyslieť odpoveď, druhú otázku by som potom dala, neviem, či sa to preložiť, alebo...
So the question is for Richard. I think you understood it, but what is the relationship between the Neo-Hilberian and the Neo-Aristotelian approach? Are they compatible? Are they adversary? So what is the
And excuse me, the other question for Eliza, chcem sa spýtať, takže je niekoľko interpretácií Phronesis u Aristotela. Minimálne teda, pokiaľ ide o vzťah Phronesis k Sofii, k múdrosti alebo poznaniu prvých princípov. Jedna interpretácia, keď to zjednoduším, je, že Phronesis v podstate nemá nič spoločné so Sofiou, že Phronesis je čisto praktická múdrosť. Druhá interpretácia, keď to zjednoduším, to znamená, že je v podstate pre bežného človeka, ktorý nemá s nazeraním princípov nič spoločné. Druhý, keď to tak do extrémový prístup hovorí, že medzi Phronesis a múdrosťou Sofia je nevyhnutný nejaký most, že bez Sofia by neexistovala možnosť Phronesis. Je tento zdroj našej múdrosti alebo nášho poznania, ktorým je údil, alebo mohol by byť určitým prameňom našej Sofie pôvody Phronesis? Neviem, či to viete preložiť.
So the question for is, there are many understandings of what Phronesis is. Some people say that in Aristotle it's related to Sophia. We need to understand Sophia to say what Phronesis is. And the question actually is, does the concept of wonderfulness, help us through the concept of Sophia to understand Phronesis, or what is the relationship there? That's for your further reflection. All right, so Phyllis, that's it.
Thank you, Andre, for your question. Actually, I don't have better answer about the question. I'm still wondering. I'm still in the dilemma, but I will share my thoughts with you. If you think of moral coherentism, logical coherentism, and the cognitive function of Phronesis, we can see that the neo-Hilberian perspective is probably a one segment of, and probably the most measurable one. Probably the other are not that measurable as the moral reasoning part. So maybe neo-Hilberians are on the right path to detect maybe moral growth in some way, but it's not sufficient for me. At least I think so. But I wouldn't disregard neo-Hilberian perspective appealing. Many of the researches I have used in my presentation are actually with the VIT and the new European models done. So if I'm saying that pedagogy student does not have more growth as other students in other programs are done with the new European model, and it's the more growth in respect of more reasoning. So maybe they are complementary. There is the reasons to be. So I wouldn't disregard, as I said, but it's not the whole picture. There's lots of factors to be taken for, but as I said, I'm really skeptical about their measurement. Thank you.
So the question has been refined in Italian, so I think we'll go for the depth.
Thank you very much for the question. Well, it's a complex question, but I would just recall the difference for Greeks in to intend what is the womb. And mentioning for Enrico Berti, he underlines that for Greeks, the wonder has not aesthetic feature, but just a theoretical feature. So in this sense, we have to intend the wonder, just the engine, to reach the discovery of the wonder itself. So to make the experience of the wonder. So I want to know more and more and more. When I discover, I made the discovery, I reach the conclusion of this process of learning. In this perspective, we can say that the wonder is the origin, thanks to which I can connect the first principles to the practical life. So in this sense, because without this experience of the wonderfulness, we have not the power to be active. So the experience of the wonderful, if we imagine a student, when he discovers something new. So, for example, I remember when I discovered philosophy. So it was in the third year during my high school. I cannot really imagine that there exists a discipline able to investigate reality as I wished, because I had that question. When I discovered all these authors, wow, I discovered something new. It was a wonderful experience for me, because like a vocation, you find a reality, a discipline that really, in which you find coincidence between what you are looking for and what the reality is. So in this sense, I think that in a process of learning, the wonder, so the experience of the wonderfulness, is exactly what makes the student active in the research. And in this sense, I think that there is a necessary connection between the Sophias and the Francis, because without the Sophia, we cannot observe Francis. But I would like to conclude with a reflection, very curious reflection of Leonie, that he wrote about virtues. He wrote a wonderful book called The Art of Living, where he analyzed each kind of virtues. And mentioning in the Soul of Life, this biography, so the wife mentioned his times about ethics, and also speaking about Francis, he thought that it is a sort of doubtful virtue. So a virtue that could be also risky, because in the Francis not as in the Aristotelian sense, like in the contemporary use of the word, you have to be prudent, and this means that you cannot risk. And this was really far from the horizon of the. So I think that there is a risk also in intended education, like just like looking at promises because of this factor, because can so I think this was a yes or no. If I'm too much prudent, the answer will be no in each cases. In this sense, I think that the experience of the wonderful is much more stronger than the experience of the practice. because it makes active in a sense that you can go with risk and believe in what you do and go further in this direction. This is just a side reflection by everyone, but was really, really so. I was, when I discovered the visa reflection, this observation by him, I was very astonishing too, because it's unusual. Fine, it was Calvin, it was completely converted, it was very great philosophers, it was student by also too, so the background is very wide. But he also made this suggestion. I think in a certain sense, in the contemporary atmosphere, so it is also wise to take this consideration. But thank you for the question, just to answer. I think that so there is this connection between Sophia and Francis, and the wonder has been intended that as this engine, so the origin, really, the possibility that we have to connect this, down to these first principles, with also the practice, so the practical.
Thank you. We got another question?
Ja by som skúsil otázku na pani profesorku Kulford. Vďačnosť, prvá otázka súvisí, či vďačnosť je chápaná ako cnosť morálna, etická, alebo ako intelektuálna. Ak je morálna, a moja otázka je, či vďačnosť získavame prostredníctvom učenia sa, alebo prostredníctvom navykania sa. A keď prostredníctvom navykania, aký je vzťah medzi phronesis a vďačnosťou? Či ten vzťah nejaký vôbec je?
So there'll be another question as well, but the first one is gratitude a moral or an intellectual virtue? And either, so if it's moral virtue, is it learned by habituation? Or be it intellectual, is it, learned through education? Not really. And also, what is the relationship between gratitude and phronesis as a virtue thus understood?
Okay, so the first question is gratitude a moral or intellectual virtue? Moral virtue. That's a short answer. That's I'm not going to defend it. It is moral virtue. What was the next question? What relation to it? Can gratitude be educated? Can it be taught? I think it can be. I mean, obviously, the way it's learned in most contexts is not necessarily explicitly. I mean, people are going to learn what gratitude is in the family, and that it's not part of a kind of official education thing. We first kind of learn to be grateful for our caregivers, if all is well, and obviously that may not always be the case. But I think obviously it's more exemplary gratitude that kind of we learn from initially, and we have our various understandings of what gratitude is from a very early age. However, I do think there are aspects of gratitude that could be taught. For example, the very things I discussed, what a proper application of gratitude is, which would include educating young people about the appropriate reasons for being grateful. Obviously, if somebody gives you something to manipulate you, you wouldn't want, as I say, not to realise that gratitude perhaps isn't warranted in those situations. So I think this discrimination that I mentioned, that you mentioned in your talk as well, has to be there. So that discrimination was somebody's definition of phronesis. I think it was Sherman, wasn't it? And I think that's the point really, that the relation of phronesis to gratitude comes in on this point about the kind of discernment and discrimination about when it might be appropriate. So gratitude is a moral virtue. Gratitude is a virtue that people are going to learn about, before they're in any formal educational context. They're going to see exemplars of gratitude. They're going to see exemplars of ingratitude as well. That's another way that we're informed. But there are more kind of explicit ways in which a right or a more discriminating approach to gratitude could be promoted that might be important if we don't want our young people to be abused or exploited or manipulated. So that comes in there, and that is, I think, where we're using that releases discrimination to help young people see the difference between being grateful for somebody giving us something freely or somebody giving us something that has strings attached. So looking behind motivations of people with things.
And the second question, Bishop Leibor, last second question. Some of the questions still? Gentlemen, yes.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Pracujem v Slovensku sú do školského networku a viac ako 10 rokov pomáham školám v budovaní tej rastovej kultúry. To znamená, aby škola nebola tak jasne administratívne poriadená, ale aby sa tam rozvíjala tá jedinečnosť a personalizovaná, aby bola personalizovaná. A teraz prosím, kohokoľvek z týchto účastníkov, ak môžem poprosiť, že vidia nejaký hlboký súvis a možno vysvetliť medzi svojou témou, ktorú prezentovali, alebo jej hlavným vedením a budovaním kultúry v školách. Je to zrozumiteľné? Áno, ďakujem.
So the gentleman works in the field of the culture of personalized growth, and he's asking any of you this question. So do you see any relationship between what you said in your presentation and how to increase or how to work with the culture in schools? So I think how to approach phronesis from the point of view of, well, what culture is at different schools, different levels.
Prepačte, ešte také doplnenie, že či vidia súvis medzi kultúrou školy a obsahom, ktorý prezentovali.
So is there a relationship between what culture is, what culture is dominated, okay, different schools, and your different subjects of your talks, I would say, phronesis and the role of phronesis? Any of you can get the question.
So,
Well, my understanding, can you start and then we will. Yeah, well.
I will try with my first thoughts. As I have seen, there has been lots of teaching methods that could be applied when in character, when infusing phronesis in primary and secondary school. Infusing phronesis can and should be in the cultural context. And there are lots of methods like having a good moral example, like a blueprint personality, that could be derived from the culture, from, I don't know, folk tales, maybe another representative of the culture of the where the school is, pupil is, so it should be particularized. So culture should be every time present when phronesis should be infused. There are other teaching methods that you can use where culture references are not can, but I accentuate this should and should be present when infusing phronesis. I cannot think about other. I focus on methods. So there can be other aspects in which culture can be connected with phronesis.
Thank you for the question. Maybe I will suggest it because I want to understand this question. So, thinking to my country, and immediate reference to politics, of course, because the private schools are organized and dictated by the politics and politicians. So maybe a politician could answer that. Your question, but as a philosopher, I can suggest that, well, it comes to my mind a study that I made on metaphysics of human rights. So it's a book on human rights. And human rights seems to be the topic today for Europe in general. And I had a curious debate with Professor Colpea. He was a politician too, he's a professor of philosophy too, who wrote an interesting book about human rights and criticizing, strongly criticizing the topic and Christianity. And in this dialogue that I had with him, he suggested as the way in which we intend human rights, he says, is sort of an illusion, because in truth, also speaking about dignity, for example, if there is no value to a student, to a person, we cannot speak also about dignity in itself. There is someone, there is God, that gives dignity to a person. And in this sense, we can also be allowed to speak about rights and so on. So I think that the real drama that we are living today, I'm not speaking ideologically or thinking to my faith, but just in a cultural way of thinking, is that there is the strong pressure to exclude completely in the cultural education transcendental horizon. So it's not more possible, and sometimes it's also illicit to speaking and to consider transcendental horizon within the cultural, well, the program, say, the school and so on. And I think that, well, it's very good. We had yesterday a very interesting conversation with Professor that basically explained me all the system in AIDS and so the problems that you have in your country. And I think that it is very important to try to import also the recognition of some disciplines as religion, just speaking about the culture of a nation inside the schools. For example, in my country, it's unbelievable how it is allowed to exclude this religion in the schools. So maybe we are allowed to speak about the gender studies and so on, but not about, for example, religion or religions as cultural background. And I think that this is very bad. It creates an incredible gap in the formation, the personal formation, because it's a part of it. And I think if I have to make a suggestion, also thinking to Friedman, I discovered his unpublished works on music. And he wrote a very interesting papers on Mozart, Schubert, Beethoven, and so on. And I think that an education, much more stronger education in music also in schools, can really open, also to be aware of these personal horizon, the thing that inside each disciplines that we then in the future will specialize. We will be a doctor, a professor, a lawyer, and so on. But we cannot take exclude these horizons, transcendental horizons, in a personal formation, because it's incredibly important. So this is just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the mic for the gentleman in the front row.
Professor.
Oh, yes, then it should be.
Okay. Then?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. According to me, the school culture is created by three groups of factors. The first one is created by what we call official curriculum. The programs we teach, the values we promote. The second group of factors is created by what we call the didactic hidden curriculum. there is what is not written, but effectively lived in the school by students and by teachers. And the third group of factors is created by the culture that the students and teachers bring to the school from their families and contexts. And all these factors, these three groups, influences character, and the character education depends on all these factors. But as educators, what can we do with these three groups? We can govern consciously only the first group, the official curriculum, the programs we choose or we create. The second group, the feeding curriculum, depends only partially from us, because this is our behavior. This is a kind of relations we create between teachers and students, and the students between them. And the fifth kind of factors, according to me, we cannot govern. There's the culture that the students and teachers bring to the school from the families to the context. And these factors are also very strong, and they influence to the character education. What can we do with this third group? At most, we can understand what culture our students bring from the family, from the context they live in, and how this factor influences the character education. Also, we should be aware of the culture generally in the school that is created from many factors, and according to our possibility, we can act and organize the processes of character education.
We have a question in the front row. Yes, just
Někdy včera se Česká republika, mě bylo líto našeho prvního speakera, že na mě nesměřovala žádná otázka, jsem ji chtěl vypálit. Už se ujel slova, ale přesto se zeptám. On zmiňoval, že naše snaha vychovávat žádné studenty k hodnotám se někdy objeví jako v konfliktu s výchovou ke kritickému myšlení. Tohle by asi bylo téma na další sympozium, ale přesto by mě zajímalo, jestli bych tomu mohl aspoň pár slov jednat, jak se to dá spojit. Děkuji.
There's a question for you actually. The question is, you mentioned in your talk the relationship or conflict between the upbringing or education to values and to critical thinking. So could you elaborate on what conflict could be in those different ways of teaching or education?
I don't know if I said that there's a conflict between critical thinking and teaching. I don't know if I understand well the question.
Čiže bol konflikt medzi jednej strany medzi výchovou k kritickému mysleniu a na druhej strane výchovou hodnotám ako
Já jsem si tady udělal poznámku, že hodnoty zaměřují kritickému myšlení, jestli jsem to správně překlad. Jo, že tam může docházet k nějakému konfliktu v tom, že se snažíme žáky k tomu, aby samostatně kriticky mysleli, a přesto se jim snažíme nějakým způsobem přednést nějaké hodnoty, které by měly respektovat. Jo, a pochopil jsem, že pan profesor jako cítí v tom určitý konflikt. Já ho cítím taky, takže proto jsem se chtěl zeptat na nějakou dobrou radu, co s tím.
So we're trying to not get lost in the translation and clarify the question even further. So on the one hand, you said that we want to lead the kids, the students, to uphold certain values which tend to be objective and understood, and on the other hand, to think critically on their own subjective. And hence, there is a chance of these two ways of moral reflection, so to speak, to be in conflict. So the gentleman can sense that there could be a conflict in value upbringing and critical thinking education. So what are your thoughts?
If I understand well the question, it is no problem when I critically think about the values, because the critical thinking allows me to understand my values and values of others. It means that the critical thinking, it is a desirable goal in character education. Even if I'm not even if I'm not I'm not if I not accept the values of others. So the understanding of others, even critically, it is a desirable goal in character education, according to me. I don't know if I answered to the question.
Thank you. Right, so I negotiated for the very last question. So one last question, gentleman up there at the back. So could we get him the mic? Wasn't that the microphone? How is that?
Thank you. I'm from Martipol University in Banská Bystrica. I want to ask actually two fast questions. First one is for Elizabeth. Professor Grimio, we are talking about that world is wandering. It's a big wonder. I agree with you in this point. The world is big wonder. And in your first slide, your presentation, there were two sentences. The first one was about the world and wonder, and the second one had hidden assumptions, because the question was, who gave the world to you? And from this place, I want to ask, in your concept of wonder of world, do you think, and now I'm asking as a philosopher, do you think that the world can be given? If yes, by whom? Okay. Short question, but very hard. And the question is for Professor Wilford, maybe for the break. Concept program from Major Lipman, it was in philosophy for children, is spread also in United Kingdom very well. Maybe you were in touch with the program, I don't know, but Major Lipman thought about appreciating thinking. It was in the third column of caring thinking. The part of caring thinking was appreciating thinking. Do you see a connection Or can we find a connection between your concept of attitude or gratitude, and this concept of appreciating thinking? Here, writing about that, this is very important to say anybody is right and so on. So to appreciate somebody, if you see any connection to this concept, if you know it, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. So short questions, short answers.
Okay, so the short answer, thank you very much for your question. So the answer, of course, is God. I just put this picture of the peak of snowy peaks to express the philosophical field of this question. So the first one is about what is the word, and the second one gives the word. But if I had to try to answer you, well, the answer is, well, with an example. I'm expecting to test this white Slovak wine. And so yesterday evening the talk is wonderful, so I'm very curious because I just the red one yesterday, so today I will try the white one. Well, if it's very good, my first question will be, where can you buy it? And so my question will be, who is the creator of this Slovak wine? So in front of something that happened and that there is, I think that the question is about who creates. It is the author of that. And well, if I have to make a quick answer, I will answer just creator. So I cannot have a conception of something that exists without who have made that. So, and I think the answer is nobody, because I hope to buy this quite white. This is encouraging. So I hope that there is a creator of something significant. That's it.
So you asked about philosophy for children, if I knew anything about that breed. Well, I have heard of philosophy for children, although I haven't had any involvement with them formally. I mean, I think those books for children, I think they would be interested in them. If you want to have a look, I brought them with me, and there are some philosophical questions for children, even things like, what is the ground of hope? I mean, it's not expressed in those terms, but some quite serious topics for discussion there. So I've never had any formal involvement with them, but I can see that they're looking for things. Now, in terms of your appreciative thinking, I'm not sure I grasp the question completely. But of course, thinking is one of the things we can be grateful for. So if by appreciative thinking you mean, is there a space to be grateful for our reasoning abilities, then I would say yes, it is. It's one of the things that we are grateful for. I mean, one of the things we did in our survey at the Jubilee Centre was asking British people what they're grateful for. And one of the top things that came out of that was our National Health Service. You know, we asked previously people what they're grateful for. That came out a lot. I don't remember anybody saying the ability to think, but I mean, it could be. I mean, it's obviously something to be grateful for. If by appreciating thinking you have something else in mind, obviously what I was trying to do in that talk was essentially look at the understanding of gratitude. And on that note, appreciation and gratitude share family resemblances with each other. But there are crucial differences between appreciation and gratitude. So for one thing, appreciation doesn't necessarily require the person who's been benefited to do anything behaviourally in response. Whereas I would argue that the appropriate response to the grateful person is to try to, when the opportunity arises, give back something to the person they benefited from. There's an example of this. If somebody gives you a lift in the car when it's raining, and you say, well, I'm really grateful for that lift, But then the roles are reversed, and you see somebody standing in the rain going you a lift, but you don't stop to give them a lift. The question is, were you ever really grateful? Because behaviourally, it seems your kind of heart hasn't changed. Now, obviously, it would be perfectly appropriate to say, I appreciate that lift. It wouldn't necessarily have the same kind of requirement to give back to somebody that I think gratitude has. So I just wanted to, the word appreciation, and it's about appreciation thinking. There's clearly family resemblance between appreciation and gratitude, but there are some differences as well. And as I say, I think Navarro and Touch are the people who've written the paper, especially about what gratitude requires of us if we're truly grateful, that appreciation doesn't necessarily exist. It's quite useful paper to read. But I'm not sure if I got your question about what you meant by appreciating thinking. So, sorry if I've got that answer.
Can I add something? There is a few articles, I can send you a link, where there is a relationship to critical thinking and philosophy with children and character education. It is on the first glance, people are rejecting philosophy with children because they think it's focusing only on critical thinking with moral, with character education. But there are a lot of arguments that go with the thesis that philosophy with children is enhancing virtues, is enhancing promises. And that it's not only critical thinking, but it's only feeling part of the community, because it means talking about community being a part of the community, and relationality and being with the other. So philosophy with children is not only critical thinking. And there are reasons, I can send you few articles that are relating philosophy with children with character education.
Thank you. We must start at this point as for necessity days, it's lunchtime. Thank you all for coming and joining. Thank you, our distinguished guests. Thank you. And let us reconvene in this hall 1:30 for the next lecture. All right,
celou hodinu, když